Hello, everybody. I'm Colleen Kruger. This is our episode 5 of our Sound Off Talks Inspiration series. Sound Off Talks is presented, and we just like to acknowledge that the project's funded in part by Factor, the Government of Canada, and the Canada's private broadcasters. I'd also like to take a moment just to recognize Music Calgary is located on Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And today we're talking with Sahdu from Nettwerk Music Group. He's the Director of A&R there, and he's calling in from the lovely Orange County, California. So he's like in tropical weather compared to us.
Hi, Colleen. How are you?
Hi, doing good. Yeah.
It is quite tropical, I guess. It's rather warm, but that's nice.
I'm just gonna like put my little plant behind me and I'll be like, this is
there you go, yeah.
I'm in the tropics too. We're so much more northern. No.
Yeah.
It's distracting for me. But yeah, we had a nice brief conversation. So Samir was supposed to come to Calgary for Sound Off this past February. And of course, that's put on hold. So next best thing is just to talk online and get to know your story and just sort of how you got started in music, and we'll just sort of go from there. So my first question is always, what was your aha moment in music?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think for me, it's like I always wanted to be in music ever since I was like I think I first wanted to be a pilot and then gave that up very quickly and then wanted to work in music, like play in a band, work in music. So I think I remember just like, I used to listen to a lot of punk rock and all that and buy a bunch of records and just kind of read the old school like liner notes and I think reading like all the people that bands like thanked and all that and being like, oh, who are all these people? What is an A&R? What is that? And that was sort of like the moment when I was like, oh, you know what? I want to work in music. And that was definitely for me a huge part of my story and kind of just learning a lot of those people and what they do and learning about the industry from just literally reading liner notes and even discovering other bands and all that too.
Amazing. So did you just go to a show and look at someone and you're like, they look like they're A&R. I want to do that. Or like, how did you discover the role of an A&R?
I don't think I've even figured out an A&R at this point in my life. Like it's such a mysterious thing. And I think a lot of that is because it's such a, the way that I view it, it's such a personal thing. It's every A&R is very different. So everyone's skill set's really different. Everyone works with bands in different ways as well. So there's no really cookie cutter way of being an A&R. It really depends on your personality, how you get along with people and kind of thing. So it was really just trying to learn from other people as I continue. And I probably didn't even really meet an A&R till a little later and try and understand that. So for me, it was really just the industry as a whole that attracted me. And, I think I've always loved discovering new bands and being like, oh, have you heard this band? Like my first ever real job was working at a record store. And a lot of that was just like showing people music. And for me that, I think that's so much of what I do is really just like introducing people to music and just saying, hey, do you like this? And trying to understand what people like too and try to cater to that as well, but kind of push that a bit more. So yeah, I think that's sort of, how I approach a lot of A&Rs. It's just such a unique thing and very different.
Yeah, definitely. So is that the sort of core role that you've held in music from, past your record store days? Did you just like hop into finding bands and did you work at a record label? Is that you started out there? Mm-hmm. No,
it really was a trajectory of very different roles. I mean, I started playing in bands and that, someone joked with me that basically, back to the aha moment was realizing that 15% of someone else's talent is worth more than 100% of mine. And that was when I was like, oh, I should probably try and work in the industry. And that was something I I think I learned at a young age, realizing I wasn't that good at music, and I probably can't really make a career. So the other side of stuff I can learn, and that kind of led me from one thing to another. And I can almost, you know, when I look back, it was a festival, and I grew up in Singapore, so it was the furthest thing away from a music industry in that sense. And there was a band, there were a couple of bands that played a festival there, and I met one of the owners of that label and kind of kept his card. And when I moved out to the States for university, I was like, hey, can I intern at your label? And pretty much from that is how it kind of snowballed. And I interned at a label out here actually in Orange County called the Militia Group about in 2007, 2008 at this point. And then kind of from that, every job I've had in the industry has kind of been a relationship from that initially. So then I ended up working at another label called Peace for Panda. I interned there, which was an owner of Militia Group had started a new label, so I interned there. And then I moved back to Singapore and worked, you know, I think for me being a foreigner and knowing that in the States to get a work visa is rather tough, like I need to prove some sort of value. And I knew what I could bring to value, that I could bring perspective I could bring was, I grew up in Asia. I understand some of the gaps there. I understand how the US market works. Perhaps there's some way I could connect the dots there. So I went back to Singapore and initially started running label services for an independent label. And that sort of snowballed when people started seeing more data coming out of Southeast Asia and Asia in a whole, and just trying to figure out how to connect dots there. And so I kind of went into that role and kind of ran a label services firm, still a partner in, that my partners run currently now in Singapore for about 3-4 years. Ended up working at another digital company at the same time, digital music label out of Hong Kong called Love Their Records. Left that, kind of focused more on my label services company, and then met Tom Gates in Singapore, who is a manager at Nettwerk. And he was like, hey, you know, a few years later, we actually met in 2012, but I think it was 2014, he sent me an email out of the blue, and he was like, hey, would you be interested in joining us at day-to-day on the management side at Nettwerk? So my first real foray at Nettwerk was on the management side, and joining Tom and Ryan, who were working with, you know, Mike Posner, Christina Perri, and what else were we working with? SHAED, Good Old War, and learning the management side of things. And so that was sort of my first foray into it. And then only in the last couple of years, I think I've been in A&R now for about 2.5 years. And only then did I move into the A&R role.
Wow, that's a cool journey. Yeah. So it's like multifaceted, all the sort of skills that you've collected along your way have probably like paid into the A&R side. So like, is a lot of your focus on the digital marketing side still, or just sort of co-min for bands that are up and coming?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of co-min for bands. You know, I sort of have A&R, the two brains that I have for A&R. There's really looking at the data and seeing how that's moving, and then there's the creative side of things as well. So, you know, when I look at kind of the bands I'm looking at, is how does that fulfill both buckets is what I'm looking at. You know, where is the data, kind of what's the value that we can bring to it as a company, and as an A&R, and also, you know, how can we kind of take that to the next level and what their goals are essentially. So most of my time is really more on the creative side and working with bands and figuring on that side. You know, my approach to A&R, it's essentially the first step to A&R to me is human development. So it really starts there. It is really making sure that the artist is comfortable in their own creative and them understanding that vision and trying to get there. And I think that's key. At the end of the day, it's really down to the artist's vision and what they want to do. And then it's sort of my job to help fulfill that, or bring in the people to help fulfill that too.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. So are a lot of the bands that you're working with currently American?
That's funny. I think I only have 2 American acts, and I have about 13 acts on my roster.
Okay, amazing.
So it literally spreads worldwide. I have 2 acts from Australia. I have an act that's out of New Zealand. I have 2 acts out of Canada. I have an act out of France. I have an act out of the UK. I have an act out of Iceland, act out of Hong Kong, an act out of Singapore. So it really is a worldwide approach when it comes to my roster. So it literally means I'm up a lot. And
yeah, I was gonna say you're never sleeping. That's cool.
Yeah,
you just like
playing
can't
around with
sleep
time
when
zones.
you're. Yeah, totally. LA is a tough time zone, I'd have to say. You have to be up so early to catch those UK people.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I wake up pretty early, so that's
Oh,
why
good.
not too, like, I'm normally up by about 7 o'clock, so it's not too
Nice.
bad.
Yeah, amazing. So, what would be like a way that you find these bands globally? Do you travel to
Oh,
see them or do you meet them online?
yeah, a lot of it's done online, and I think that's sort of been very fortunate in the way that we're structured. That even as everyone kind of stays at home and work from home, it doesn't really stop the way that I do work or how I approach the bands that I find. A lot of the discovery is either going through a lot of Spotify, a lot of Apple, but also a lot. I think I have a network of people that I trust that bring me acts, and I bring them acts as well. That sometimes just end up on my doorstep. And I've also had other times there's a lot of cold emails that turn. Like, we just signed an act recently that was just a cold email that we got out of the blue, and ended up signing him. So I think it's just important to always listen and be open to acts, because you just never know where that act might come from. And I think always be grateful when people send you music, and kind of go from there.
Totally. So, being like, if someone just cold calls you, do you always listen to everything or sort of specific in terms of someone bringing you something?
No, I definitely do listen to everything, or at least try to listen to everything. I think that's sort of important when it comes to it. And I think if anything, at least respond back to them, because you just never know where that relationship might take you as well. But also, the fact they even thought about you for sending them music and feel like you're a fit, grateful for that. There are plenty of other labels that they can send stuff to.
Totally. Yeah, that's fair. So in terms of genre, do you scale a certain kind of genre in the bands that you work with, or are you specific in terms of who you work with?
No, it's really kind of all over the place in terms of genre. Us as a company have we're very much, our bread and butter is the singer-songwriter world, but we've kind of progressed into this alt pop world as well. So I think for me, it's just I need to connect with the music, and also is it something where the goals kind of align as artists and as a label, and also do I connect with them as humans too. I think that's very important, because you can spend so much time with them as well. So it's really, those are kind of three brackets that I sort of look at things too.
Totally. Yeah. I try to express that to people. It's like, just show up and be your most authentic self. And that those are when we're looking to work with people in music, you're sort of wanting to work with someone's authentic self, not just what they think they want or what you want or whatever it is, Like, you don't have to hard pitch somebody. You just have to show up and be like, this is what I do. This is what I create. Do you like it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Just take the edge off. I think some people put a lot of pressure on how they would approach somebody and what that looks like. So
absolutely. I think it's so important to, I think when we sign artists and I work with artists, it's because they have a unique perspective. And I think as humans, everyone has a unique perspective. And I think it's so much of them understanding that and having the confidence in knowing that. I think, like I said, it really comes down to human development, because a lot of times that's very hard at 18 compared to 27 or 28 or even in your 30s. So, I think I think age is sort of a number when it comes to that, but really understanding who you are and where you kind of want to take your project, and knowing where you want to take that too, I think is equally as important. But I think, yeah, you're right. It's really coming down to who you are as a person, because I think people can know when you fall in a trend or trying to be someone else. And, you know, I think that's how it's just very easy to see through it, and fans will be able to see through that as well. You know, I think fans want to connect with people. Like I've always said, the difference between a good song and a bad song is the human connection in that. Like the favorite songs you have is because of an emotional connection. And I think that's the value of art that we create, because songs are timeless. Like a really good song is like, you can listen to that. People today or people 20 years from now can connect with that in whatever headspace that they're in. So I think that emotional connection is, to me, is the biggest difference.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, well, I like your story quite a lot. Sad. Well, we'll have to have you in Calgary at some point very soon, whenever that can
I'd love to
occur again. But we sort of cap these chats off and get your insights and what advice you would give somebody that's starting out working in music, or how they, just any good life advice that you would suggest. I like your 15% of 100. That's some raw advice, though. You're just like, you took it in a very nice way.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reality of, you know, I think just be at peace with a lot of things and let things kind of flow. There's no point in, you know, I think 2020 was a great example of how plans never work out. And there's no point in kind of, you know, throwing a, you know, whinging about what's not working out, but kind of focusing on the positives. And I think 2020 has been great for people to reevaluate their priorities and I think we're doing that as a society and from a global level too, which is great. So, you know, I think it's when it comes to working in music, it's understanding what, and just in life, understand what value you can bring in the day, like what is the positivity that you can bring and what's kind of your unique voice, like what makes you different in that sense and what makes you connect. And I think just be like, it goes down to exactly what you said, just be who you are. And a lot of times that's some of the best artists and the best work comes out of that.
Yeah, most definitely. I like that sentiment, is like, show up, like add value, see where you can add value. Even if it's, like I was telling my story, is just like creating posters for shows. That was my add value, and then it sort of built from there. But yeah, just show up and be like, what can I do? Anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like when it comes to work in the industry, it's just about trying to ask as many people, can I help you in some way? And like, you know, I met a lot of people that are starting, wanting to get into music or even trying to have a career switch. And it's like, you know, why start at zero when there's a value of what you've already done? Like, how can you incorporate that into the music industry? How can you make the industry as a whole a better industry? And what can you change in that? I think that's the ideas people are looking for. I think that's when I talk to people, that's the sort of, you know, that's what makes everyone excited. It's like, we don't want another carbon copy of another idea. It's just like, what's something new and different that you can bring? And I think everyone's lives are so different and their journeys are so different that they have a different perspective. And you know, there's something that they can bring as long as they speak up and voice that, because you know, you just never know, your idea could spark something else or something along the line. So you just never know.
Totally. And like music and art in general is so unique to the community of people working together. Like, it's almost not cookie cutter and you can't recreate it. And it's sort of special in terms of who's where and when and what they bring to the table. So yeah, just sort of being in any situation, sort of finding the community or someone to reach out to and be like, what can I do? It goes a long way.
Yeah,
I think now more than ever, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that community aspect has always been super important. Like, you know, I grew up in like the punk rock world, and a lot of those people in different parts of the industry but connect with that. But I think even now, like, you know, kids on TikTok or in some sort of subculture are connected. And I think that's a community, and that's what kind of will will rise together. Like someone was telling me, I heard this quote recently, which is like, when the wave comes in, all the boats will rise together, and that's sort of what the community is essentially. It's like you kind of have that. You kind of just have to keep pushing people, and as a whole, sorry, the dog here.
Oh, it's okay.
As a whole, that's, I think everyone will rise together.
Oh, totally. Yeah, never feel like, I think too, like, never feel like you need to hoard it and like be individual in, I guess, music, because I don't know, it's just such a unique platform. So it's just like you showing up is unique enough. So, and however you show up is that. So if you're hoarding it and feeling like, oh, I'll do it on my own, it won't go very far. But again, it's like the community thing.
Yeah.
Everyone will go further. Sorry.
I mean, you're totally right. It's crazy. Like when I had this thought the other day. It's like, what is music? And it's essentially sound waves. Like it's literally air, right? Like that's what we're creating these connections and businesses out of, is essentially we're selling air. Or connecting with people with air, which is just like the most intangible thing ever. But as soon as a song connects with someone, it becomes the most tangible thing ever. So it's just the product of music is exactly, it's just so intangible that it's hard to pinpoint.
Yeah. You just gotta feel that wave. So
totally. No, 100%.
I'm very much of that. I feel music, but I can never like verbally express how I feel about it. I'm just like, I know what I like this. Me in my heart, I don't know.
That's funny. That's like, you meet a lot of A&Rs that are like ex-producers, ex-musicians, and have a lot of knowledge in how to kind of work in studios and all that. And I don't have that. Like that's not me. It's not something I've been good at. So for me, so much of when I A&R stuff, it's really about the feel and kind of what that makes me feel. And it's really that more than, oh, you need to change this or do that. It's really about the overall vibe and how do you kind of maintain that overall.
Yeah. So when something strikes you, how do you communicate that to your team that they get it? If you don't speak music language, so to speak.
I mean, we're able to communicate that. It's more of the silly things. It's like, instead of saying like, oh, those chords, change that to a major, minor, or whatever. It's like you all of a sudden hear like managers and like label people speaking like sonic sounds, like trying to mimic the instruments, which is like the dumbest way of doing it. So, it's definitely more efficient when you put it down timestamps and figure out how to do that. But like, you get on calls and you're like, why are we just making this drum sound? And obviously no one can make it sound the same, but it's definitely a challenge, but it's something like you kind of work with. And I think every artist speaks a different language too sometimes, and just trying to figure out what works with them and how they communicate with producers and things like that. So
yeah, totally. I know it's like there's several languages being spoken at any point, so however you can translate it, it's fine.
Well, and I think the way that I approach it is like, I work with my artists that I work with because I trust them. Like we sign them because of their vision and who they are, and we're not trying to change that. Like at the end of the day, you guys are professional musicians, and we trust that when you go in the studio, you know what you're doing. And so there's a lot of trust in that side too, where it's really not that big of changes that we're looking at when it comes to it, and it's more of a communication.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, well, it's been really nice to chat with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Get to know your journey. But yeah, we hope we'll bring you to Calgary soon when everything opens up.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks so much. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.